Theme-dependent fundamentalist Mormon. Enlarged edition OFA paper presented at the Mormon History Association Annual Meeting, Park City, Utah, May 21, 1994. By Ogden Kraut. The Independent Fundamentalist Mormon. By Ogden Kraut. Introduction: The Flag of Fundamentalism. Fundamentalism seems to be a light that cannot be hidden under a basket. In spite of over 100 years of denunciations, felony laws, persecutions, prosecutions, excommunications, and imprisonments, their flag still flies. Who are today's fundamentalist Mormons, and how did they originate? Apparently, Elder Mark E. Peterson was the first to use this term, which infers support of the original and fundamental doctrines of the LDS Church. Such believers are found within the mainstream church, in many different groups, and also among those termed independent fundamentalist Mormons, those who are not active in the LDS Church, or any of its organized offshoots. Fundamentalists generally believe the doctrines of Mormonism cannot, and should not be changed. For this reason there have arisen many disputes and divisions. From the earliest history of the Church, it became clear that the laws of the priesthood were not always the laws of the Church. Doctrinal disagreements have been like magnetic poles, causing large and small divisions ever since the days of the prophet Joseph Smith. He himself introduced and separately taught higher principles to a few of the more informed and receptive church members. This caused serious problems for both Joseph Smith and the Church, according to Brigham Young. On one occasion, several of the 12, the witnesses of the Book of Mormon, and other leading elders in the church met in council in one of the upper rooms of the temple, and discussed the question of how the prophet Joseph could be deposed and David Whitmer be chosen president of the church. Contributor 10:1. This doctrinal dichotomy has continued to the present. That old-time religion didn't die a slow death. It just went underground in the days of President John Taylor. He and many others went into hiding, not just from the Gentiles, but from many of the Mormons themselves, because of a bounty on their heads and their dislike for polygamy. The laws of God and the laws of man were in conflict, and so were the Mormons with each other. Of all the conflicting and controversial doctrines, plural marriage has created the most public interest and curiosity, and certainly the most trouble. Similar negative reactions to the principle come from three very different areas, i.e. 1. Today's church leaders wish it were never a part of their history. 2. The Utah Attorney General and law enforcement officers wish it were not still lived in Utah. 3. Mormon women wish their husbands would quit talking about it. A chronology of fundamentalism. Plural marriage was the first domino to fall, and other gospel practices and doctrines soon followed, i.e., United Order, Kingdom of God, rebaptism, Gathering of Israel, etc. Because of those who refused to compromise or retreat, fundamentalism was born. In 1886, 4 years before the manifesto, President John Taylor had been asked to sign a type of manifesto declaring that the church would abandon the practice of plural marriage. He briefly considered it, but when he inquired of the Lord, he was answered with the following revelation. Thus saith the Lord, how can I revoke an everlasting covenant? My everlasting covenants cannot be abrogated, nor done away with, but they stand forever. I the Lord do not change, and my word and my covenants and my law do not. I have not revoked this law, nor will I. 1880-1890 Revelations, Comp by Kraut, pp. 54-55. As a result of this revelation, along with further instructions from the Lord, President Taylor set apart several men to continue the principle of plural marriage, because he was told that church members would soon abandon it. Little did he know then that his own son, John W. Taylor, would be among the first to be excommunicated for plural marriage. The following rift involved members and leaders alike. It became so serious that at one point Wilford Woodruff said that he would about as soon attend a funeral as one of our council meetings, the spirit of contention was so unpleasant. L. John Nuttall Journal, February 27, 1889. The misunderstanding and controversy over plural marriage has continued to this day. Most church members, however, by their own choice, know little about the subject. I am reminded of a fellow who came into my cousin's office several years ago and said, "I just don't understand all this stuff about polygamy." Joseph Smith said one thing and Heber J. Grant said something different. Brigham Young said one thing and Spencer Kimball says the opposite. My cousin told him, "I have some advice for you. Just forget everything that anyone ever said about the subject, and go home tonight, and read what the Lord had to say about it in section 132 of the Doctrine and Covenants." The next day the fellow came back and said, "Well, I read it and I still don't understand it." My cousin responded, "Then I have a little more advice for you, quit reading, it's not doing you any good." Most people today still don't seem to understand the principle of plural marriage. Even Apostle John A. Widstow commented, "We do not understand why the Lord commanded the practice of plural marriage." Imp Era 46:191. When Joseph Smith and Brigham Young taught this doctrine, however, the saints clearly understood that it was such an important doctrine that church members could not be exalted without it. But year after year attitudes and doctrines and understandings changed. The following brief chronology paints a vivid picture, laying the groundwork for the rise of fundamentalism. 1843, referring to plural marriage, Joseph Smith said, "The same God that has thus far dictated me and directed me and strengthened me in this work, gave me this revelation and commandment on celestial and plural marriage, and the same God commanded me to obey it. If I do not practice it, I shall be damned with my people. But we have got to observe it. It is an eternal principle, and was given by way of commandment, and not by way of instruction." Contributor 5:259. 1866. On many occasions Brigham Young was just as emphatic about the importance of obeying this principle, i.e., "Do you think that we shall ever be admitted as a state into the Union without denying the principle of polygamy? If we are not admitted until then, we shall never be admitted." JD 11:269. 1880, and from John Taylor, "And when the government conflicts with heaven, we will be ranged under the banner of heaven and against the government. The United States says we cannot marry more than one wife. God says different." S. L. Tribune, January 6, 1880. 1882. The Lord revealed to John Taylor in October of this year that no one, but polygamists, should preside over the priesthood, for he said, "You may appoint Seymour B. Young to fill up the vacancy in the presiding quorum of 70s, if he will conform to my law. For it is not meet that men who will not abide my law shall preside over my priesthood." Mess. Of the first present 2:247. 1884. According to John Taylor, an eternal plural marriage could be performed outside the temple, which is not taught by the church today. I was asked if certain ordinances could be performed in different places. I told them, yes, under certain circumstances. Where? I was asked, anywhere besides in temples. Yes. Anywhere besides the endowment house. Yes. Where, in some other house? In another house or out of doors, as the circumstances might be. It is the authority of the priesthood, not the place, that validates and sanctifies the ordinance. JD 25:355. 1886. During this time, church leaders were receiving pressure from Gentiles and members alike to abandon the practice of plural marriage. So Pres. John Taylor inquired of the Lord just how binding the principle was on church members, and as mentioned earlier in this section, he was told by the Lord that this everlasting covenant could not be abrogated nor done away, and that, "I have not revoked this law, nor will I, for it is everlasting." And those who will enter into my glory must obey the conditions thereof. Even so, Amen. 1880–1890 Revelations, Comp by Kraut, pp. 54–55. 1887, a new Utah state constitution was drawn up by members of the church, and one of the provisions was, bigamy and polygamy being considered incompatible with a republican form of government, each of them is hereby forbidden and declared a misdemeanor. Sector 12, Art. 15, History of Utah, O. F. Whitney, 3:584, when the election vote was tallied, 13,195 voted in favor of it and only 502 were against it. This occurred 3 years before the Woodruff Manifesto. 1889, President Woodruff received a revelation from the Lord saying, "Let not my servants who are called to the presidency of my church deny my word or my law, which concerns the salvation of the children of men. Place not yourselves in jeopardy to your enemies by promise." Messages of the First Present 3:175. 1890, Wilford Woodruff signed the manifesto saying, "I now publicly declare that my advice to the Latter-day Saints is to refrain from contracting any marriage forbidden by the law of the land." Official declaration at the end of the D&C. Most Mormons rejoiced to hear this compromise with the government. Others thought it was a serious mistake, an exchange of godhood for statehood. 1891, Wilford Woodruff explained, "The Lord has told me by revelation that there are many members of the church throughout Zion who are sorely tried in their hearts because of that manifesto. Since I received that revelation, I have heard of many who are tried in these things. I know there are a good many men, and probably some leading men, in this church, who have been tried and felt as though President Woodruff has lost the Spirit of God and was about to apostatize. I have been called upon by friends outside of the church, and urged to take some steps with regard to this matter. This feeling has also been manifested more or less by the members of the church." Des. News, November 7, 1891, also quoted in Way of the Master, Peterson, pp. 47–49. 1904, another manifesto, or official statement, was issued which threatened members with excommunication for not following the new policies of the church. 1905, the LDS Church dropped Apostles John W. Taylor and Matthias Cowley from the quorum because of their continuing support of plural marriage, which led to their disfellowshipment and excommunication. Cowley eventually capitulated with the church and came back, while Taylor became a hero of the Fundamentalists because of his faithfulness to principle. 1906, a 3-year Senate investigation into questionable activities of the church resulted in over 3,500 pages of testimony, revealing that both members and leaders professed one thing and practiced another. 1910, the Salt Lake Tribune printed a list of over 200 new polygamists, which included the names of 6 members of the Quorum of 12 Apostles. October 8, 1910, another announcement was made by the church stating that some persons had assumed authority to continue these outlawed activities. 1912, a document was published by John W. Woolley which was the first public announcement of a small society that would become known as Fundamentalists. As these eternal principles were fading in the church like a sunset, they were becoming a sunrise to the Fundamentalists. And as the church continued to make doctrinal changes, the list of fundamentalists grew larger, and the gulf between the two became wider. 1914, another announcement was issued by the church stating that members were secretly engaging in these outlawed ordinances and practices. 1921, another announcement came from Heber J. Grant, who himself lived plural marriage 10 years after the manifesto, saying that anyone still living the principle should be cut off the church. He stated, "We have excommunicated several patriarchs, because they arrogated unto themselves the right, or pretended right, to perform these ceremonies. And after our having excommunicated several patriarchs, another one, so I am informed, has committed the same offense. Conf. Rept. April 1921, page 202. 1925. Another announcement warned members against such men as John Woolley, who have performed disloyal acts contrary to the rules of the Church and laws of the land. Messages of the First Present 5:242. 1926. An official warning stated that members knowing of any plural marriages should inform the proper officers of the Church, so they may be excommunicated therefrom. Messages of the First Present 5:249. 1931. In a strenuous effort by the Church against fundamentalism, Heber J. Grant stated, "The Church does not countenance, aid, abet, tolerate, or sanction in any way, shape or form the contracting of so-called plural marriages. ******. I do not know how to make it plainer or more forceful. If I did, I would do so." Messages of the First Present 5:294-95. This statement was read at General Conference and was approved unanimously. 1933. Another official statement was published in June of this year. A lengthy treatise using the following derogatory terms relating to plural marriage and those who lived it: false doctrine, illegal practice, apostates, misguided, unauthorized, void, contrary to church, false and mock marriages, violative of law, criminal, falling away, unrepentant, disrepute, recalcitrant, evilly led, rebellion, no condoning or trifling, rebellious, corrupt, misled, false representations, and adulterous. See Messages of the First Present 5:315-330. This document left no doubt as to the attitude of the Church leaders toward the practice of plural marriage. 1935. The LDS Church issued a test oath for questionable members to sign. Among the first to fail the test were members of the Short Creek branch in Arizona, and 21 members were excommunicated. This year was also the beginning of Truth magazine, which continued for 23 years under the editorship of Joseph Musser. 1935, 1943, 1955. Government raids were conducted against fundamentalist polygamists, with many of the brethren being imprisoned. Newspapers throughout the nation and many foreign countries carried the story. The Church was siding more and more with the state in the desire to abolish plural marriage. After the Arizona raid on Short Creek, the Deseret News carried an editorial which stated, "Law-abiding citizens of Utah and Arizona owe a debt of gratitude to Arizona's Governor Pyle and to his police officers who Sunday raided the polygamous settlement, and we hope the unfortunate activities at Short Creek will be cleaned up once and for all." Des News, July 27, 1953. However, it's interesting to compare President George Q. Cannon's comments several years before when he praised men for going to prison because of their religious beliefs. All honorable men and women will be impressed by such devotion and courage. It will have more weight than any amount of preaching or writing upon the subject. Juvenile Instructor 20:197. The LDS Church, who was once the avid defender, now became the great offender. It was a case of the persecuted becoming the persecutor. Fundamentalists became the monstrous troll to be eliminated. So diligent were the Church leaders in trying to stamp out fundamentalism, that interviews to determine a member's worthiness included the question, "Do you affiliate with any group or individual whose teachings or practices are contrary to or oppose those accepted by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints? Or do you sympathize with the precepts of any such group or individual?" LDS Church Form Number 31671, 5/90. The local leaders have even resorted to the recording of license plate numbers of those attending fundamentalist meetings or homes in order to provide evidence for trials and excommunications. Houses out of order. At first only a few were called to live and teach these principles of the fullness of the gospel. There was no organized group, just occasional informal meetings in various homes to discuss the gospel. However, Because of the increase in numbers, meeting houses were soon built and then even special ordinance buildings. Regular and organized church meetings resulted. But many people have thought this was above and beyond their original calling, so they have refused to join any of the fundamentalist groups, thus becoming known as the Independents. Thus, divisions and hard feelings developed among the fundamentalists themselves. On October 20, 1945, the Deseret News reported, 10 cultists sign promise to drop polygamy teachings. Some of the prisoners, however, had refused to sign this little manifesto, which ironically was finalized on the very day and month that Pres. Woodruff signed his manifesto. This caused a lasting division among most of the polygamists involved. The independent fundamentalist Mormon believes that both the LDS Church and the fundamentalist groups are out of order. He feels there is no single basket where he can put all his eggs. As the Church backed away from its commitments, the groups felt they had the right, and even the responsibility, to pick them up and continue them. It seems the LDS Church was not going far enough, the groups were going too far, and the independent fundamentalist was caught in between. Louis Kelch, the youngest member of the original priesthood council set up by Lorin Woolley, was familiar with the guidelines first given to the 7 council members. When the others had died and he became the senior member, he was often asked, "Why don't you come and take your rightful place in the priesthood?" He answered, "I am in my place." He remembered that Lorin Woolley, when asked to organize and hold regular meetings, replied, "The only true Church of Jesus Christ is already organized." Louis Kelch Journal, page 46. Along this line, Jenna V. Hammond, a wife of one of the deceased group leaders, recently wrote a very revealing book called The Betrayal of the Godhead, Priesthood Work, and Priesthood People, which explained the original calling of those men who were set apart to continue plural marriage. She wrote, "Back in March of 1928 the Lord had Lorin C. Woolley call Leslie Broadbent and John Y. Barlow into the priesthood council, and with that calling they were given one special appointment, or assignment, 1. The only thing they were to operate in was to keep plural and celestial marriage alive. They were to be only a spiritual entity, and not to take on the duties of what the church was set up for." The Betrayal. Hammond, page 2. A few pages later, the author continues with a list of what they were told not to do. 1. Not to organize. 2. Not to colonize. 3. Not to collect tithing. 4. Not to set up any united orders. 5. Not to proselyte. 6. Not to give patriarchal blessings. 7. Not to hold public meetings. Ibid, see page 10. The reasons such warnings were given were that, 1. These areas were mainly the responsibilities of the LDS Church. 2. If the people concentrated on them, they would lose sight of their main commission to keep plural marriage alive. And 3. Getting into these additional responsibilities would result in the creation of a hierarchy. And it is the tendency of most leaders to become strong rulers that eventually exercise unrighteous dominion over the people, resulting in priestcraft rather than priesthood. We should remember the Saviour's instruction, "Whosoever of you will be the chiefest, shall be servant of all." Mark 10 verse 11. Most independent fundamentalist Mormons feel that it is improper to duplicate the organization of the LDS Church. Some groups even have quorums of high priests, 70s, elders, and even a relief society and primary. But this was not the intent in 1886, when John Taylor appointed certain priesthood holders to keep plural marriage alive, nor the intent of Lorin Woolley, who said, "It is not our mission to organize. Our mission is to keep plural marriage alive." Quoted by Price Johnson in Reminiscences, comp by Rhea Coons, 220. Lorin Woolley's prophecy has certainly been fulfilled, that there would be many different factions and various groups, and that a large number of people will be divided this way and that. Quoted by Harold Allred in Reminiscences, comp by Rhea Coons, 4:3, there was one major fundamentalist group before 1945, and now there are many. Although there has been considerable criticism against the forming of polygamous groups, many people need to belong to some type of organization, a church, a group, or some form of fraternity. It is a correct principle to gather and associate together, to meet often, and to help and encourage each other. For many who believe in the fullness of the gospel today, membership in a fundamentalist group is very enjoyable and vitally important. However, the dilemma arises for some: which group is correct and which group should I join? Each fundamentalist group claims divine revelation and spiritual guidance, yet they claim different authority and religious practices, and don't recognize the ordinances of each other. Some people have been so confused by the conflicting claims of authority that they wouldn't join any of the groups. John Singer was an example of such an independent fundamentalist, and as a priesthood holder, he performed the ordinances necessary for his family without going to a group. He preferred to keep pretty much to himself. Shortly before John was killed in January of 1979, he said to me, "I don't want any publicity. I just want to be left alone." The last time I saw him, however, there were 3 television stations interviewing him about his plural marriage and about teaching his children at home. I said to him, "John, for a man who doesn't want any publicity, you're an absolute failure." You will remember that the Singer family saga took place here in Summit County. There is a wide variety of people and specific beliefs among the independent fundamentalist Mormons, and many of them have paid a heavy price in prison because they would not compromise. Louis Kelch, Arnold Boss, Morris Coons, Charles Zitting, Price Johnson, and many others. Though relatively unknown to most Latter-day Saints, these men suffered in prisons for up to 7 years because they would not yield their faith for freedom. Another independent fundamentalist, Roy Potter, put forth a noble effort in defending his lifestyle. In the early 1980s, he tried to prove the unconstitutionality of the Utah felony law against plural marriage. He had been fired from the Murray Police Department for living plural marriage, but his plea was denied in the courts, showing the extreme bias that still exists against this Mormon and biblical law. Generally speaking, nearly all fundamentalist Mormons, independent or group, just want to be left alone to live their religious principles as they so choose. Advantages and disadvantages. As mentioned, the lifestyle of any fundamentalist Mormon is usually not easy nor popular. Frequently jobs are lost, homes are broken up, they are ostracized by the church, there is usually a constant economic battle, and suitable wives are difficult to find. Mark Twain, an avid anti-polygamist, noted this last condition especially when he stopped in Salt Lake in the 1870s. He changed his mind somewhat after his visit, for he commented, "Then I was touched. My heart was wiser than my head. It warmed toward those poor, ungainly and pathetically homely creatures," referring to the women, "and as I tried to hide the generous moisture in my eyes, I said, no, the man that marries one of them has done an act of Christian charity, which entitles him to the kindly applause of mankind." Roughing It, page 117, 1872. In addition to the above, however, there are also other problem areas for the independent fundamentalists that are more difficult for them to enjoy since they do not belong to the LDS Church, or a fundamentalist group. 1. We have been instructed to gather together often and to partake of the sacrament. 2. The organizations provide a place where testimonies can be borne and ordinances can be performed. 3. Children have the opportunity to learn and associate within the organization, and dating and marriage opportunities are better. 4. The support and frequent association with others of like mind provide strength and a sense of belonging. So when some individuals are asked to leave the church, they feel comfortable joining a group and transferring their confidence from their church leaders to group leaders. But also noteworthy are some disadvantages within the church and groups. 1. The members are often so closely supervised in their activities that they lack the freedom they desire. 2. Members have a tendency to follow their leaders' advice, doctrines and teachings without question. 3. They put their trust in a bishop, president, or the arm of flesh, rather than going directly to the Lord. 4. Conditions often subtly evolve into a type of priestcraft, without the people even realizing it. The independent fundamentalist Mormon makes every effort to avoid priestcraft, as described by Nephi. Behold, priestcrafts are that men preach and set themselves up for a light unto the world, that they may get gain and praise of the world, but they seek not the welfare of Zion. 2 Nephi 26:29. This condition exists, to one degree or another, in both the church and break-off groups. An extreme example of this was taught and printed in a recent group lesson. That oath and covenant, as I understand it, is that we have an oath and covenant with the keyholder of that priesthood, their leader, to obey him in things, because he holds the keys and is the mouthpiece of God. And he is God over us. Lesson on Keeping or Breaking Covenants, March 19, 1994, page 13. On a bulletin board of the same group, a notice was posted that read, "Put your trust where God puts his. Uncle ___________________." The first name of their leader. The arm of flesh. There is a real danger in placing too much faith and confidence in organizational and church leaders. In spite of God's frequent warnings that man should not counsel his fellow man, neither trust in the arm of flesh, D. and C. 1:19, there is a constant barrage of such instructions as, follow the brethren, follow your leaders, follow the prophet. Before even investigating anything, the questions are often asked: has that been approved by the church? Is that in the lesson manual? And is the author of that book a good member of the church? It becomes more and more difficult for people to think for themselves. Thomas Jefferson certainly valued the importance of free thinking, and he commented, "I have sworn upon the altar of God eternal hostility against every form of tyranny over the mind of man." Thomas Jefferson and the Restoration, John J. Stewart, page 41. And the prophet Joseph Smith emphasized the same idea when he explained a passage from Ezekiel. The people should each one stand for himself, and depend on no man or men, that righteous persons could only deliver their own souls, applied it to the present state of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, that they were depending on the prophet, hence were darkened in their minds. TPJS, pp. 237-238. After the prophet Joseph Smith was martyred, an assortment of brethren arose to claim his title and position. Orson Hyde became troubled over the fact that they were leading people away from the gospel. He then received a revelation from the Lord stating, "Evil men, ambitious of power, must needs arise among you, and they shall be led by their own self-will and not by me. Yet they are instruments in my hands, and are permitted to try my people, and to collect from among them those who are not the elect, and such as are unworthy of eternal life. Grieve not after them, neither mourn nor be alarmed. My people know my voice and also the voice of my spirit, and a stranger they will not follow. Therefore, such as follow strangers are not my people." Unpublished Revelations, Volume 1, Collier, Part 65, pp. 104-105. Brigham Young gave the same counsel. Now those men, or those women, who know no more about the power of God, and the influences of the Holy Spirit, than to be led entirely by another person, suspending their own understanding, and pinning their faith upon another's sleeve, will never be capable of entering into the celestial glory, to be crowned as they anticipate. They will never be capable of becoming gods. They cannot rule themselves, to say nothing of ruling others, but they must be dictated to in every trifle, like a child. JD 1:312. Unfortunately, sometimes the fault comes from the people themselves who want to be dictated to. They want someone else to do their thinking for them. However, this is not the case with most independent fundamentalist Mormons. Statement of beliefs. If today's independent fundamentalists were to adopt a set of articles of faith in addition to those by Joseph Smith, they might include the following 7 declarations. 1. We believe that all the laws, ordinances, doctrines and principles of the priesthood are eternal and unchangeable. However, members of the LDS Church may vote to accept or reject them. 2. We believe that because the LDS Church has sought to become a world church, it has adopted worldly practices. We are living at the time prophesied by Amos when he said, "A famine in the land, not a famine of bread, nor a thirst for water, but of hearing the words of the Lord." Amos 8 verse 11, as evidence of this, where are the "Thus saith the Lord" revelations, heavenly visions, angelic appearances, gift of tongues, seer stones, etc. 3. We believe that sin is the only justifiable ground for church excommunication. Associations, beliefs, sympathies, attending outside meetings, and writing or reading certain books are not considered sins. Even the Bishop's Handbook states, total inactivity in the church, or attending or merely holding membership in another church, does not constitute apostasy. March 1989, 10-3. 4. We believe that excommunication from the LDS Church for supporting and defending the fundamental principles of the gospel does not jeopardize one's priesthood. God does not condemn people for believing and practicing true principles. 5. We believe that man should not counsel his fellow man, neither trust in the arm of flesh. D&C 119, as well as many other references in the document and Cove, Book of Mormon, and Bible. 6. We believe that authority to seal plural marriages was the only commission given in 1886, not to form churches or groups that duplicate the LDS Church. 7. We believe the U.S. government, the LDS Church, and the groups are all out of order. Soon the One Mighty and Strong will come to set things in order, D&C 85, and they who are not apostles and prophets shall be known. And even the bishop, who is a judge, and his counselors, if they are not faithful in their stewardships, shall be condemned, and others shall be planted in their stead. D&C 64:39-40. Conclusion: will we need to commence anew? Over a century ago, the Apostle Orson Pratt saw so much discord, disbelief and general apostasy that he said, "I do not know, but that it would be an utter impossibility to commence and carry out some principles pertaining to Zion right in the midst of this people. They have strayed so far that to get a people who would conform to heavenly laws, it may be needful to lead some from the midst of this people and commence anew somewhere in the regions round about these mountains." JD 15:361. Isaiah crudely but accurately described our time when he said, "All tables are full of vomit and filthiness, so that there is no place clean." Isaiah 28 verse 8. Did Brigham Young also see this serious condition existing in our day, when he requested that his coffin be built deep enough, so, if I wanted to turn a little, I should have plenty of room to do so? Brigham Young, The Man and His Work, Preston Nibley, page 536. The independent fundamentalist Mormon struggles to maintain a Joseph Smith Mormonism. He believes in the doctrines, principles, ordinances, and commandments given at the time of the gospel restoration. He knows eternal principles come from an unchangeable God. Mormonism has a history all its own, but fundamentalist Mormonism is also unique. No other church history can compare with such an exciting and fascinating story. With nearly 9 million Mormons who know little or nothing about fundamental Mormonism, there is a golden opportunity to ask them some golden questions. What do you know about Mormon fundamentalism, and would you like to know more?